Well, once again, good morning. We are grateful for the privilege of sharing with you in these morning meditations. It is a joy to be able to do this with you. We are aware that life comes at us fast, and we often have challenges that are beyond our control. But it's good to be able to have words of encouragement and inspiration along the way. And we want you to know that you are loved and appreciated, and you are in such a way irreplaceable. We often share these messages each week for our morning meditations. We have dubbed them, I don't know how well they go, Meditations for the Day from Reverend Dr. J. But really, even that sounds a bit corny, but I want you to know that we want to share these words of encouragement with you to remind you that we're thinking of you, and that as you're journeying in life, whether you're checking this out at home, whether you're sharing it with friends, whether you are in the hospital or a person who's caring for those who are ailing or going through their own challenges in life, we want you to know that we appreciate you. Today's meditation is entitled Contradictions, Not Final. Contradictions, Not Final. I thought much of what to share with you today as I was reading some familiar passages from some of my favorite authors. One of them happens to be the late Reverend Dr. Howard Thurman, and the other happens to be, as many of you have heard me quote him before, Mark Nepo. And in reading, I was aware that somehow in the moments that we're in now, and all the challenges that we face now, many of us are living through extraordinary contradictions. Contradictions that push us to the limit or place us in places that we would not want to be. In fact, they are by definition, contradictions are by definition, a combination of statements, ideas, or features of a situation that are in fact opposed to one another. Or to say it further, contradictions can be a person, a thing, or a situation in which inconsistent elements are present. It is amazing to think that contradictions happen in our lives all the time. We are presented with both ands, as Soren Kierkegaard would often say, either or. We're not presented with that in between. And so sometimes it's either light or darkness. It is either good or bad. It is either right or wrong. We are either on the left side or the right side, polar opposites in our lives. We've discovered that life sometimes comes at us with contradictions. Things that we would imagine would work out for us don't always work out in the same way that they were presented. There are some statements that are, by their very nature, a contradiction. In other words, someone saying that they love you, but by their actions or by their words following that may demonstrate the opposite of love. There are those who may say that they support you, but by their actions and behaviors, it may indicate that they have everything but support for you. There are moments in our lives in which we face such contradictions, in which even on our own measure, we've discovered that our choices or our lives seem to be living contradictions. So living the contradictions in life can perhaps be the greatest challenge for those of us who refuse the collective cynicism or the general apathy that is so prevalent in our current discourse. So many people find themselves in a place where our sense of saying whatever needs to happen, being cynical about circumstances, saying that we're hopeful but not being hopeful, saying that we're supportive but not being supportive, saying that we're in love but far from it. All of those things seem to be contradictions that overwhelm us. But these are some things that I did read, and I think it's important that whenever we're in the middle of contradictions, that contradictions are not final. They are temporary. Two things can be in opposing positions, but they don't have to stay that way forever. There are places where we move in our histories or in our lives toward compromise. In your life, in my life, we find that. So I want to invite you to live the contradictions, to lean into the contradictions, to learn from the contradictions. In fact, for some of us, to even love the contradictions. In other words, to embrace the contradictions in our lives, that some things can be opposing and very difficult and on opposite sides of the world, yet and still we can appreciate what it is that they bring to us and how they add to our lives. In fact, they bring us to the place of wonder. Let me share this from Mark Nepo, and I think you'll understand what I mean. And this is under a chapter of his entitled Cultivating Wonder. And I believe that the contradictions are the ripe, fertile ground to cultivate such a thing as wonder. Turn to wonder. Here's what he writes. We're all here by a thread, but it's a very strong, eternal thread. On any given day, we can be terrified that it's only a thread, and at the same time, stunned that such a thing as vast as life is held together by this magnificent, unseeable thread. In other words, the challenge of our lives is to see the wonder in the contradictions, that two things that seem to be contradictory or opposing one another are held together, maybe by faith, maybe by belief, maybe by a mother, maybe by a father, maybe by the resilience that one has to get up and try again. Whatever it is, we've discovered that wonder is the thing that is produced when the contradictions often should tear us apart, but somehow we hold. I love that. I call wonder God. Yeah, it is wonderful to be able to see how those things that should be in contradiction somehow should not have made it, should not have survived, but yet we do. Yeah, I like this part because wonder is that magnificent thing that puts us in a place where we turn to wonder. You look back over your life and you imagine, how did I get here from there? You turn to wonder. I wonder what would have happened if that set of circumstances would have occurred. I wonder what would have happened if that choice would have been made. And we realize that we made it on a thread. That really, as the psalmist says in the 107th Psalm, if it had not been for the Lord on our side, you fill in the blanks. If it had not been for the thread, if it had not been for grace, if it had not been for someone's kindness, if it had not been for someone's word of encouragement timely placed, if it had not been for a delay, if it had not been for the struggle, I'm on my way, and why is it so hard? Not knowing that the difficulty slowed us down long enough to avoid the tragedy. Those moments cause us to turn to wonder. And we realize that the contradictions of life are not final, that they are working out for a larger good. And I don't know what that good is. I wish I could tell you that all things work out the way you want. But I invite you not to curse the contradictions, but to lean into them and to discover the wonder behind your survival, your arrival, your thriving, your success. That a few months ago, I talked about the secrets to success, but I think it hinges on this very important piece. The contradictions come in our lives, and they can be tragic. They can be difficult. They can be hard. It is in those moments that we discover that life is fragile, but yet it's unbreakable. We discover that somehow we teeter and think we're going to fall, but yet we soar. It's in those moments that we discover what it looks like to be that baby bird in the nest that I heard about years ago. There's a story. I think Edwin Friedman tells a story, an adaptation of this story. But there is this mama bird who is now ushering out her baby birds out of the nest so that they can get on with their lives. And there is one little bird that will not leave the nest. So she encourages him and pushes him out of the nest, only to watch him refuse to open his wings and looks as if he's going crashing to the ground. There, halfway down, his mother bird and father bird swoop down with their wings and catch him and raise him up and bring him back to the nest. And when they get him back to the nest, they berate him, saying, "Why didn't you open your wings?" He doesn't say anything, but he remains silent. Not knowing what was wrong with him, they do it again the next day, and they push him out of the nest. And again, he starts to plummet headfirst straight to the ground. And halfway there, they swoop down and save him again. Finally, they decided they're not going to try to push him at all. And they decide to leave the nest and make a nest of their own in a different place. And when he awakens, he looks for his mother, he looks for his father, and they're nowhere to be found. And so he resolves and says to himself, they just want me to leave the nest and they've left me. Well, I am not going to fly on my own. I will not open my wings. But he gets to the edge of the nest and he jumps down, waiting for his mother or father to save him. And he plummets. And while more than halfway down, he discovers that no one is coming to save him. And 3/4 of the way down, he discovers that his wings open automatically. And he starts to open them and feel the wind beneath his wings. And suddenly that rush pushes him and propels him into the air. And he goes higher and soars higher than the nest and above all that he'd ever seen before. That sometimes in our lives, here's the moral, that sometimes in our lives, the contradictions of falling and flying or plummeting and soaring will cause for wonder to kick in, and we end up flying higher than we've ever done before. So I encourage you today, as you are going through your week and as you're trying to hold on to these contradictions and trying to make sense out of it all, trying to measure how to handle your family, your finances, your future, trying to deal with your own health challenges or dealing with another's health challenges, trying to care for patients or care for loved ones, or at least just to keep your own sanity. I want to remind you that those contradictions are not final, but they always turn us to wonder. And if you turn to wonder and look at it long enough, you'll discover that your survival, your arrival, your thriving comes from the one who loves you most. That you will not find yourself caught up in a contradiction that does not resolve itself in a way that causes you to turn to wonder. It's not final, but there's something else beyond this. For many who find themselves even something like death and dying have discovered that the contradictions of living and dying are resolved in an afterlife or a belief that there's something after this. So be encouraged as you journey. Be encouraged with the contradictions that come, that you'll make it. Why? Because on the other side of the contradiction is wonder and the God who created us all to carry us through. Thank you for your time. I want to remind you again that you are loved, You're appreciated and you're irreplaceable. We share these messages with you in order to inspire and encourage. We hope that we've given you something to think about this week. Enjoy. Have a great week.